I'm talking about being a good man, right? There are rules to this. Like, you are responsible for the people around you. I don't like this I'm not my brother's keeper bullshit. The hell you aren't. That's the whole fucking reason you're on this planet, motherfucker. Yeah. It's like, and the quicker you realize that, the quicker you can realize that eating well and exercising and training, you know, fighting or guns or whatever it is, it's not about you looking cool or looking fit or being attractive. It's about being a functional defender of the things that matter.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We got a special guest today, Brett Ender from Mafia.
AKA Meat Slave.
Meat Slave. Wait, is it Meat Slave now? Did you change your name?
You and Ross called me when me and Harry, my co-host, came on the podcast. The episode was titled Meat Slaves, which we loved. Yeah. So great.
Yeah, I mean, that's better than Meat Mafia, because then you don't have, like, I guess it depends on which way you want to take it, organized crime or sexual kinks.
Yes.
Right, which is, you know, I mean, look, you could do both, I suppose, but...
I would prefer both.
Yeah. It's important to be a Renaissance man these days, a multi-hyphenate, as they like to say.
Absolutely. It's great seeing you, man, as always.
Yeah. What have you been up to lately?
Dude, nothing super crazy, man. It's got 3 weeks left in the year. Honestly, just biggest thing right now, that's a good question. Honestly, just focusing on growing Noble, just getting the best podcast guests on the show. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a cool time, obviously, post-election. It feels like a lot of the things that Harry and I have focused on for the last decade are starting to potentially come to fruition. And some
like
of these,
what?
Just even you see RFK deep frying his turkey in beef tallow, and just a lot of these things that have been labeled as alternative health in regards to nutrition and, you know, dietary philosophies that we have, that you have too. It's pretty cool to start to see this stuff trickling into the mainstream, and obviously we'll see what actually occurs tangibly over the next 4 years, but it's pretty encouraging.
I mean, what are you expecting to see, I guess, from, let's just narrow it down to, well, you know what, let's back up a little bit. Give me a problem statement on the American diet. Like, what mistakes are we making and why?
That's a really good question. I would say the biggest thing is that 68% of all calories consumed in the U.S. are coming in the form of ultra-processed foods.
That seems like a lot.
It's a lot, man.
And no, I would say there's probably a number of reasons for that. The first is that the government has lied to everybody since the 1950s, yes. Right? With this food pyramid bullshit. The idea that for the first time, like, I don't know how the mind didn't rebel at the time at it, because you're talking about the World War II generation, meat eaters.
Yes.
And I would love to see some data. I've never seen data on this, but the level of meat consumption, it may have just been the boomers, right?
Yeah.
Like, the older people may have been like, no, that's stupid, I'm not doing that. And then the boomers are like, oh, fucking Frosted Flakes, why not, you know? I would like to see the data on that. But certainly it started with the institutions that we're supposed to be able to trust, that were designed specifically to, I guess, educate and help Americans, were liars from the beginning.
Definitely.
The FDA, right?
Yes.
Completely full of shit.
Yes. And it makes sense, too, why that second generation that you were talking about, you know, you get a hit of these ultra-processed foods. It's like no one's denying the fact that, the dopamine spike you get from them is pretty incredible compared to meat and berries. And so I think the first part of what you were saying was, what do you hope to get over the next 4 years? I don't even know if it's anything tangible outside of just the distillation of the right information that we're talking about.
No.
Right? I think that's a pretty admirable goal.
I actually said something similar to that to somebody on Twitter the other day. Because there's been this progression amongst, and this is why I think it might be a generational thing with the boomers. There's been this progression amongst the Gen Z crowd, not millennials, right? They're still eating stupid shit and buying their $7 Starbucks every day with 30 grams of sugar in it. It's like, cool, man. I think I get that much a day, but do your thing. But the younger crowd who's what I think it might be is we have a tendency to stay with what's comfortable to us, and that's probably where this backstopped phrase, well, that's how it's always been done, comes from. It's just a way to massage comfortability instead of like actually doing the right thing. Yeah. But then the new generation they're not exposed to that, right? And they're like, oh, well, this is just looking at everything without any kind of bias. It's very clear that this is what you should be doing, right? Yes. And the jury is in on ultra processed foods. All of the health problems that America is experiencing right now are because of that, right? Yeah. Like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer are primarily a result of these things, those are the 3 leading causes of death. Definitely. So maybe it is a generational thing. I was talking to somebody on Twitter about this. Like, if through all this stuff that we do, political stuff, veteran stuff, whatever, if I accomplished one thing, it would be nice if it were that. Just like people reading labels on food, and honestly, if the food has a label, don't even eat it. Yes. Right? Like, why is there more than one ingredient in this? Like, I'll do the ingredients at my house. Right? Yeah. Let me handle that part. I think I can, just put some assembly required on the side of the steak, and I can handle it from there. Right. 100%.
I would say that's probably one of the biggest ways that I've changed my tune as well, even just with the Meat Mafia podcast. And we talked about this a little bit the first time I came on your show, but how we got started was just I had crippling ulcerative colitis for about 5 years and was shitting blood 30 times a day, was on a cocktail of immunosuppressant drugs and gravitated towards an all-meat diet. And so started just blogging and telling that story. The story starts blowing up. People are asking me about carnivore. It's very easy to just go further and further down that dogmatic rabbit hole, especially when that's the thing that you're starting to become known for. And I would say the biggest way that I've changed the last 2 years is all I care about is what you just said. As long as it's a single ingredient, unprocessed food, and ideally sourced from a local farmer or something you've hunted yourself, it's really up to you to figure out what combination of macro and micronutrients make you feel the best. Sure, yeah. Right? Like, I think we've both done a ton of different diets. They all work. Yeah. But we're worrying about carbs and fruits and vegetable consumption. And
well, it's like, it's fuel, right? Yeah. So what type of engine are you operating with right now? And even somebody that's, I'm not talking about even the difference between super active and sedentary. I'm talking about a super active person during the fall months versus the summer months. Your diet should probably be different, right? And that's why, I'm more and more I'm looking into seasonal diet. Stop eating stuff that's out of season. Definitely. Because generally speaking, we've had to manipulate that crop to make it available out of season, right? And that's why, so tomatoes, potatoes, nightshades, right? I don't think they're that big a deal if you eat them in season. I think your body's ready for that kind of stuff. Like your metabolism changes pretty rapidly and throughout the year. For somebody that works out a lot, you think of it in terms of, am I bulking, cutting, or sustaining, right? Yeah. But for the average person, it's the same thing. Like, if you live in fucking northern Minnesota, you probably walk quite a bit less in the wintertime, which is why it's not just the food that's making you put on that weight. It's a lack of activity, right? Yeah. Because it's cold outside and you don't want to fucking go out there. And maybe that's just how it is. Like, I still would recommend you moving around as much as possible. But, if you know that you're not going to be, certainly you should adjust. You should eat more protein and less carbs in that situation for sure, right? Because you don't need as much of that short-term burst energy. So eat protein, build muscle. Why not? You know what I mean? It makes sense to do that. I think one of the bigger problems is that people have no sense of biology whatsoever. Like, they really sincerely don't understand how any of this stuff works. Like, the difference between a single chamber stomach, which is what human beings have, and 2 and 4 stomach ruminant animals, which is primarily what we eat, aside from chicken and shit like that, right? I guess pork as well, but for me, I mostly eat ruminant animals. And why that's important is because everything has a biodefense mechanism, right? Animals have teeth and claws to fight. They got legs to run away. They got a brain to think and hide, right? Plants can bury themselves in the ground. They can have thorns. They can be hard to reach. They can be impossible to digest, or they can be poisonous, right? It's like one of those things. Like pretty much everything that goes above ground that you can just go walk up and grab it, that's not something you should be putting in your body, right? Now, berries are good. They have thorns, right? At least it has some self-defense mechanism, which it understands. And so it's not going out of its way to be more bio-unavailable or anything like that, right? But an animal that has 2 or 4 stomach chambers, 4 is better, right? Like an axis deer versus a white-tailed deer, it's 4 versus 2. They can eat bristly things. They can eat thorns. They can eat fucking grass all the way down to the fucking root and get the nutrients from it where we can't. And they can store it in their fat, and then we eat it.
Yeah.
That process is something that the average person has no idea. Like whenever I tell people that, they're like, "Oh my God, I didn't even know that was a thing." I'm like, well, yeah, man.
No one knows that.
No one knows it. No,
Yeah.
It's like that's the only way you can get away with telling people that a high sugar, low fat diet makes sense is ignorance.
Yes.
Right? Because this is basic biology, by the way. This isn't like we're not splitting the atom here. This is stuff that I don't know if they knew it back then. But we definitely fucking know it now. But still, people operate, as you said, 68% of all calories consumed are ultra processed. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's like you're talking about multiple chambers in the animal stomach being a determinant of if you want to eat that meat or not. And then you also talked about seasonality. And I would say that probably 90% of Americans have never even thought about the concept of seasonality with their food before. They just think, oh, because I can get oranges and apples and watermelons and all these vegetables in the grocery store, that's normal.
Yeah.
And it's not at all.
No, it's not. I mean, you should definitely, and this is one of the good things about local farming. Not that you necessarily should have one yourself, but being in a vegetable fruit co-op of some sort, or is buying them locally. You don't really have to think about it because they can only grow. It's not a factory farm. They can only grow stuff that's available to be grown right now, right? Like, I don't eat corn for the most part, but it only grows one time a year outside. Inside, you can do whatever you want, but outside, it only grows once a year. What is it, knee-high by the 4th of July, something like that? And then you harvest a couple months later. It's like, this is how human beings are about 300,000 years old now. We've been doing the same thing for all of it except for the last 100 years. Yeah. And the results are in, folks. It's not good. Like, I don't think there's there's probably never even been a community, much less a civilization, that's had what we have now, which is 40% of people either diabetic or in pre-diabetes, right? I don't think that's ever happened before. How could it have happened?
No.
You know? But it starts, with just kind of understanding how things work, but it's clear that this was made, that the truth was intentionally obfuscated for profit. Yes. Obviously, right? Because if you look, all the infrastructure is set up around these ultra-processed foods. Like, Americans weren't asking for this. During World War II, when there were food shortages, you know what people were eating? They were eating fucking pemmican. Right? They were eating pemmican. They were eating. They were using lard to cook their food. Yes. Right. High calorie, nutrient dense stuff. And then after World War II, when America is now rich all of a sudden, and all these industrial people that were, coming out of the Depression through World War II, and now we've got money to spend, they intentionally set all this up. They fucking brought high fructose corn syrup into the diet. It's in everything. Yeah. It's in less stuff now than it was 10 years ago, but from 1960 to 1990, it was in everything. It was in everything. And soy is in everything. and so, I mean, which adds an additional layer, which is endocrine disruption, right? Like people, we're getting hit from all sides. We have microplastics, we have toxic exposure to heavy metals, and we have these endocrine disruptors, the chemicals and hair products and soaps and shit fuck up your endocrine. All the candles that you own, you should throw them into the fucking ocean.
Yes.
You know what I mean? There are good candles.
Yeah.
They exist. But soy are not good candles.
No.
Like that shit's getting into your brain. Lavender is getting into your brain, right? And it's fucking up your endocrine system, which is to say your hormones. And then finally, another thing about just stuff that people don't know, most of the hormones in your body are made in your gut, and they're made inside of lipids, inside of fats, right? If you don't have good fat in your gut, I don't mean like around it, I don't mean visceral fat, I mean eating good fat and having it sit at the bottom of your stomach. If you don't have that, then your hormone production, it will never be as good as it could be. Maybe you're young and it's still functioning okay now, maybe you're an anomaly, but for the average person, and we see this throughout society, testosterone levels are down about 40% over the last generation. And then you think of the second and third order effects of that, right? Like we're in a wave of depression and suicide and nihilism, you know, on the periphery. It's like all of this stuff tracks back to the fucking food we put in our body.
Yes. That's why it's, you know, that's why we ultimately do what we do, because I think it's easy to be like, to say to yourself, okay, why are you talking so heavily about this topic? Are you just trying to lean into the algorithm and fear porn? And it's what you said. I think a lot of these issues that you're talking about at a macro societal level purely stem back to the quality of nutrients that you're either nourishing or poisoning yourself with too. And I think there's a really, when you talk about the next 4 years or just the future in general, I think there's a huge gap for just almost like a discerning, moderate voice that leads with what we're talking about just getting back to single ingredient, real foods sourced very, very well. You know, the alternative health movement has been great, where I think a lot of people have actually learned more from content creators and health influencers than their own doctor. And now when I scroll my Instagram, there's part of me that just thinks, how good is this information? Or is this person just incentivized to lean into the fear porn to make a clip go really viral, right? Like I don't know, there's almost a balance between avoiding microplastics, and then there's something that seems weird to me being like, you're a grown male and you're afraid of touching receipts, right? Like just, you know what I mean? Like there's gotta be this kind of moderate discerning voice where yes, most things are bullshit, yet you're also a very resilient human being. I'm sure you think about that, right? What's that? There's some balance we can find. Yeah,
I mean, look, life is, and you find this out when you get into more and more complex situations, whether it's raising children or being in a dynamic work environment, or in some of our cases being in the military and having to do complex problem solving where the results are either good or death, right? Like there's a lot going on there. You're not going to be able to dodge all the danger in life, right?
Yeah.
So you got to make yourself more resilient, but also there's an element of like Kentucky windage to it too, right? Like if I'm going to, and think about it this way, I'm going on vacation next week. My workout opportunities are going to be limited.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to adjust to that or just eat it. Sometimes it just sucks and I got to get back into it when I get back, right? Like that's just how life is. You don't want to be 70 years old with a bunch of fitness trophies in an empty house. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like life is meant to be enjoyed. You want to fucking have a family and friends and a place to gather with all of them and enjoy all that stuff. And, you know, we make sacrifices to make that happen.
Yeah.
And in the same way, it's like, you're not going to, look, if I was working at a grocery store or something like that, I would definitely wear gloves to not touch those receipts all day. But if you're going to the grocery store once a week, that receipt's not going to do shit to you. I mean, you've got to handle them constantly. Yeah. I think it's something like somebody, I think it was Hugh. I think Hugh was the one that did this. It's like 200 touch points a day or something like that. Which if you're running a cash register, you're probably going to do it. But
yeah.
If you're like at HEB or something like that, you're probably touching more than 200 receipts a day. So I would probably wear gloves, to be honest. But you going into the store and buying fucking grapes and shit, you're fine, dude. Just relax.
Dude, that's
You know what I mean?
beautifully said. It's almost like what we're talking about is almost called the resiliency diet or the resiliency protocol, where it's like Dan trains hard throughout the course of his life so that way he can go on vacation and have some drinks, have some pizza, whatever it is, and just, and not have to worry about, ideal case is you train, but if not, you're just going to get right back on the horse. It was like the first time Harry and I came to come on the podcast, we had never had your seltzers before. If this was me 6 years ago and I was more extreme, I would have declined and been like, oh, I'm not drinking alcohol right now, versus just being like, dude, just live life, have one or two seltzers. We had a great conversation. I heard Paul Saladino say that he will never eat a cookie ever again. And I think of
Fuck that.
like, dude, that's the life you want to live. Like, God bless you if that's what you want to do. But when I go back home, my parents live in Jersey. My mom's a great cook for Christmas time. Dude, if you think my mom would slap me in the face if I declined that.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, you can't pull that bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about this yesterday, actually. But it was about violence. And, some of us have a predilection for it. There's good wolves, bad wolves. Some people like to say stuff like that. But it's not the end state. And I think this is something that is a good lesson for anybody. And it doesn't just pertain to violence. It pertains to any kind of discipline, right? Violence is the deadbolt on the door. It's not the house. You know what I mean? Like, I use this as a tool to make sure my home is safe, my family is safe. And I use my diet and my exercise to make sure that I get not just the most amount of time, but the best quality of time, right? And so, but what's the point of having the best quality of time if you're fucking if you're weighing your food every day, right? Is that really the life that you want to be living right now? Life is... Thomas Jefferson actually used to say this. He didn't mean it in this way, but he said, I've increasingly found that life is exclusively for the living. And what he meant was that we shouldn't be making draconian laws now that affect our ancestors 200 years into the future. That's what he was saying. But even within your own life, like, you should certainly set up guardrails, right? Because that's important. Just winging it when it comes to diet and exercise and your health is like driving a car with your hands off the steering wheel and a blindfold on. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Now that's fine in some cars now, I guess. But for the most part, not a great idea. And also, it isn't like, but you don't have to like white knuckle the steering wheel all the time either.
No.
You know what I mean? Like we have made it through quite a bit as a species. We shrunk down to like 25,000 people sometime about 150,000 years ago. And now look, there's just 8 billion people on this planet. Just fucking relax, man. Enjoy. Like, what's the point of doing hard work if there's not something on the other end of it?
Oh, the contrast creates the beauty, don't you think?
I just don't understand that. And maybe it's just some new form of fundamentalism. Or maybe it's people that are deeply insecure that don't, and I don't mean about their appearance or anything, but they're deeply insecure about their level of discipline. So like, well, I just can't even be around. That's why I don't personally believe in things like AA and abstinence from a particular substance. I think you should take time from time to time to not do something, right? Because life goes in cycles and stuff like that, and you don't want to have anything to have control over you. But if something is so domineering that you can't even be near it, it's controlling you from a distance.
100%.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, that's the solution, is not to put your head in the sand and ignore it. The solution is to fix it and become disciplined. That's my opinion. Now, I've never had addiction issues, but people in my family, a lot of people in my family have, and my understanding is that is hereditary. And maybe from nurture, maybe from nature, hard to say on that. I don't know if there's a gene for it, but I've never had a problem with it because I refuse to think that way. Right? Like, if I find myself doing something too much, I was just like, oh, I'm just going to not do that for a while.
Yeah.
Right? Which is what you're doing right now with nicotine. By the way, right? It's like, yeah, it sucks, but I'll do it later.
100%.
Fucking care. Who fucking cares, man? But if you like walked in today and saw one of our sponsors, Lucy, on the desk up there, and you're just like, oh man, I got to get out of here. I can't handle this.
Yeah.
You are not prepared to live a normal life.
No.
Right? Like
No.
especially if you're a man, like there's all sorts of challenges out here that we need you as a man to take care of, like your family and all this all these challenges that arise during daily life. And if you can't handle this one, if you can't like develop a callus for this thing, enough discipline to handle just this small thing, then how can you be trusted to do anything at that point?
Dude,
right?
100%.
And I don't mean from my perspective. I don't give a shit what you do, but like we do these hard things because we know that in between where I am and where I want to be, there's pain, right? And I've got to get through it or around it. I just talked about this with one of my buddies the other day. You either got to get through it or around it. And man, just taking your ball and going home, I don't understand it. I don't understand how that benefits anybody.
Yes.
And I don't like the attitude that's like, well, I mean, I've tried, I just can't get around it. I just can't deal with that. It's like, no, you can, because people do all the time, right? It's just not true that you can't. What's true is that you don't have any discipline, right? And discipline is a lot like swimming, man. It's like you don't immediately jump into the deep end of the swimming pool.
Yeah.
Like you gotta honestly, you have to treat yourself like you're a fucking toddler again in some of these ways. I've seen people do it successfully. A lot of people actually. Now a lot of them used psychotropic drugs to help with that. Fair enough. But little by little, more and more exposure to something, and the same way that you would teach a child, the more times you do the right thing, the easier it gets. And the more times you do the wrong thing, the harder it gets to do the right thing. It's like, that's just a fact. That's you play baseball in college. You skip batting practice for 6 months. It's like, good luck, bud.
Yeah, good luck.
Like, because hitting is about timing, right?
Yeah.
More than anything else. You just can't do that. You can't abstain from stuff like that. I just don't. I've never seen it work. I've never seen somebody just quit something and not relapse, ever.
100%. Yeah, you make such a good point about just our relationship with vices and addiction, and the quitting nicotine was interesting because I've used the pouches very consistently for the last 2 years, and I think by the time I decided to quit, I was doing a full tin of 12 milligrams a day.
Jesus.
So whatever 12 times 20 is,
that's a lot.
So it was from the time that I opened my eyes to the time that I would go to bed. And I was noticing, I initially started taking it because, hey, I'm trying to build a supplement company. We want to be able to build it into something amazing and have a great liquidity event within a few years so I can set my family up for financial success. And then once I started doing more research about dopamine, I was realizing, oh, you're just using it to sit on the couch and throw something on TV, and you can't understand why you're unable to get off the couch. Well, because you're getting a dopamine hit from the nicotine you're throwing in, which really should have been a dopamine hit from you taking action and doing something with your business or being out in the world. And I publicly posted my decision to just pull the ripcord on it. This was about 2 months ago, and I got so many polarizing responses, primarily from other men that were around my age, being like, oh, nicotine's good for you, and justifying it. And I'm like, dude, I'm not trying to say anything about, the effects of nicotine being a positive or negative. I actually think in a lot of cases it's a net positive. For me, it was, as a man, I had issues treating this pouch like it was my binky and being unable to open my eyes and go work out without taking a pouch, right? Like I have to rewire my relationship to the compound. But my goal is to get to a point where I can throw in 2 or 3 pouches, just to be able to use it as a nootropic to do work and build my business. But I'm not at that point right now. So I'm going to abstain, and I actually gain confidence cutting it out temporarily, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I mean, you would do this with anything else. If you're working out and you're trying to do a lift and you can't get it right, what do? You take the weight down, you go back to basics. This is something that I think always works. That is, it isn't to say that you personally will always succeed, but that methodology is always, over the right amount of time, successful. Because the fact of life is that the weight never gets lighter, you get stronger, right? And that is true in every facet of your life, from the way that you learn new skills or the way that you tolerate discomfort, right? It's all of it compounds, in life. It just doesn't make any sense to me to not do something because you're not good at it.
Yeah.
Right. That goes against every instinct I have, to be honest. Yeah.
So when you recognize, oh, I'm not good at something, do you feel like you naturally just gravitate towards it and you love that beginner's mindset, or is that something that you've cultivated? Because I struggle with, I try and force myself to run towards it, but it's definitely a very forced thing.
Well, my entire career is built around doing shit I don't want to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't like attention. I don't like talking to people, to be honest. If I could just talk to a couple of people in my family and sit in a room alone for the rest of my life, I would be completely fine with that, right? But, one of the things that I think, especially as a man, that you should be looking to do is to turn your weaknesses into strengths, and the reason that it's effective is because you have insight that other people who naturally gravitate towards that don't have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the process of trying to overcome the challenges in front of you actually will not always, but very often make you better than other people doing it. Now, I'm still awkward as shit in social situations, not because I'm just intrinsically awkward. Now it's just because I don't care.
Yeah.
Like I don't care what you're telling me. You know what I mean? So it's going to be difficult for me to pretend like I'm paying attention, especially with this face. But this part, the media part, has been challenging, especially the live events where there's a bunch of people around. That's not my scene at all. So yeah, I do it on purpose. People ask me all the time because somebody will ask me about something like, yeah, I'm pretty antisocial. And like, well, you talk to people for a living. I'm like, yeah, I know. But it's what's the other option? You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like if you look in a more broad sense at all of life, typically speaking, the challenges that you run into are things that can sharpen you and make you better, right? As I said before, that there's pain between you and where you want to be or what you want, typically. So I think it's a really good idea for you as an individual to gravitate towards immediately shifting your posture towards a challenge rather than shying away from it. I think it's a good idea. I think there's something elemental about it. There's something like savage and raw about that. It's like, fuck you. I don't give a fuck what this is. You're not going to beat me. You know what I mean? I think that's I think that's part of the human spirit that's made us successful as a species, that's made us rise to the top of the food chain here.
Well said.
It's like, why would you turn away from that now? Even in your individual personal life, why would you turn away from that? It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think thinking about actually believing that it's possible to turn these weaknesses into strengths is so big too. I had this pop up today where we had to let go our CFO of our supplement company, he's done incredible work. We decided to go into a different direction, and I was nervous as shit about the conversation, where I put it off for a week. I could have honestly had the conversation a week ago, but I've always enjoyed selling and building relationships with people in the context of business. And I realized that there's almost like a yin and yang to that, where I think some of the things that maybe made me proficient in selling also made me struggle with difficult conversations as a founder. And I just had this moment 5 minutes before the call. I just said to myself, dude, what if you just lean into this conversation and this perceived weakness actually becomes a strength over the next 5 years? And the only way it's going to become a strength is it's going to be you going on this call. You might bumble over your words. You might sound like an idiot. But you have to do this. There's no putting this off any further, and ended up having a great conversation. But dude, I confront that stuff all the time with what we're doing right now.
Yeah. Anybody, and this is another thing that I think is just something that we know ubiquitously but refuse to acknowledge at the micro level in our lives, and that is that repetition is the number one way you get good at doing something, right? Every athlete knows this for sure. Like the more swings you take, now the more good swings you take, the better your swing is going to get. If you sit around and fuck around, that's why it matters. My buddy Greg Hurwitz writes those the Nowhere Man's novels, and one of the characters got these 10 commandments, and one of them is how you do anything is how you do everything, right? It's like repetition and doing things the right way over and over again. This is just another way of saying good habit building, which is something that every jackass out there that thinks there's some kind of life coach will say that phrase, right? Habit building. And they're right, to be honest. It's that's the one thing that you know is true. And you know it down to your core, because one of the things that I like to tell people is, like, write down or say out loud what kind of person you want to be specifically. And then think of what that person would do, right? And this is another, Greg actually writes this in some of his books. I think one of the mentors in the book says something like, imagine a man that's better than you that does the things that you want to do and then do what he would do, right? It's like, now you're when you frame it like that, when you write down a list of things that person would do, then you can become that person.
Yes.
Right? Like, you start helping people. You start holding doors for people. It doesn't even occur to you not to turn around and help your girlfriend or wife or whatever out of the car when you're in an Uber or something like that.
Yes.
It becomes instinct at a certain point. And there's some amount of work to get there, but it's not that much. You just pay a little bit of attention, and you can instantly improve the quality of your character, right? Like, immediately. It like, I'm talking about in a matter of days, it becomes, and try this around your house and do it with something that has nothing to do with this. One of the, for people with traumatic brain injury, one of the things we'll do is, like, for the next week, I want you to every time you open a door, use your non-dominant hand, right? It reactivates the other side of your brain. That's all it does, right? It's the same thing as taking mushrooms, to be honest, right? And so if you're not into mushrooms, and you don't want to do that, or you got to take drug tests and you can't do it, whenever you're feeling a little bit of brain fog, spend the next 7 days, like all 7 days, and do things with your non-dominant hand that you would normally do with your dominant hand. Now, what you'll notice is after the third day or so, you're doing it instinctively, right? And then you'll have to get back to normal later. Like, you'll have to reset that habit again. Now, the old wisdom, I guess you want to call it, if you want to call it that, on habit forming rather, not building, is that it takes about 21 days. It's actually about 10 weeks to build a lifelong habit, right? But you can really change things within the course of 3 weeks. And why wouldn't you, right? With that minimal effort, and you can instantly improve the quality of or not instantly, but you can, like, certainly improve the quality of your character. Why would you not do that? You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, this isn't about ethics and morality. It's about being a high functioning person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what? I think of that a lot, and I think of the second tier of that. Once my brain and body are kind of in sync on understanding this habit formation and the utility of it, I start to ask myself questions like, okay, what are skills that every man should develop? You know what I mean? What are some things that I should definitely know that I don't know right now? And that's, again, turning a weakness into a strength. And nobody can fucking stop you from doing that. Learn to build a fire. Do you really know how to build a fire with no equipment? You know what I mean? Because what happens when the heat goes out? I can tell you this. My master's thesis, we talked about this, or I wrote about this. If the power grid goes down, 3 million people die in the first month. If it stays down, for 18 months, which is what they expect. It would take 18 months to get the power grid back online. We're talking about up to 90% casualty rate because people don't know how to do any kind of sanitation. They don't know how to dig a slit trench. They don't know how to find clean drinking water. Nothing. They don't know how to source or maintain food without refrigeration. Right? Like these are things you should probably know how to do. Everybody that we've ever come from up until the last 3 generations forever have known those skills. Everybody. Like every swinging dick out there, even the women would know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Now we have no idea. I was talking to my buddy Carl Higbee about this yesterday, actually. Do you have the skills to even survive? You know what I mean? And that's just one facet. We're not all survivalists here. We live in a pretty comfortable society. But back to your point, do you have the skills and confidence to have tough conversations with people? That's something, right? Why not work on that? I'm not saying go pick fights with people. Obviously, that's stupid. But there's tough conversations out there that need to be had. And, make a list of them that you haven't done yet and pick the easiest one and go do that.
Yeah.
Right?
That was my reminder today of, like, I remember, the last week delaying the conversation and, hey, should I listen to this podcast that's going to help with communication or Chris Voss and negotiations? And I just had this feeling 10 minutes into the call, I just thought to myself, the only way out is through. And that's what's so difficult about it is it's so unsexy that there's truly no magic bullet. The only way is to just have the conversation as soon as you recognize it. Just don't put it off.
Yeah. I mean, can you think of another example of something that and we do this all the time, man. We like catastrophize and hype up some situation in our brain and make it way worse than it really is.
Yeah.
And then you just go deal with it and you're like, God, that was what the fuck was I waiting for? Now the problem is like bad news does not get better with time.
No.
It's still going to be bad news, right?
Yes.
So it's like, okay, I mean, it's not always true that you can get ahead of a problem or solve it early or something like that. Sometimes, like if you got cancer, telling everybody immediately, you still got cancer, bitch. You know what I mean? It's like,
totally.
But there are plenty of situations where dealing with things in a timely manner are certainly better, right?
100%. Especially as a founder, I just saw this clip online. I think it was a clip of Elon talking about how this might have been 10 years old because he looked pretty young, saying how being the founder of Tesla and SpaceX, it feels like as a founder, he's constantly chewing glass and staring into the abyss. Because if you're a founder, right, you're not really focusing on the things that are working necessarily because those problems are solving themselves. You're focusing on things that there is not a solution to that's being presented to you. So you're just constantly going head to head with those things. But if you view those problems really just as a decision to solve and understand that the sooner you deal with those things successfully, the better your life is going to get. And you're going to gain confidence because you didn't put it off. You didn't delay on that thing. It's all like you were saying, almost like default aggression towards those problems.
Yeah, and why not, right? I mean, I am one of the other commandments from that book is always play offense. Like I think that's something you should do in your life. You should. It's true from your health, like, and we know this, like one of the most famous sayings in the history of English is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? Everybody knows that phrase. And it's true, not just with medicine or health, but with everything. That's part of being resilient. It's like, we know these things instinctually, but for some reason, we just can't make that leap. And you would think it would be more intuitive from a culture that's rooted in like Judeo-Christian values.
Yes.
I'm not particularly religious myself, but it's like the format and rigidity of that 10 commandments, right? Specifically, or if you're Catholic, there's the catechisms, there's all this other stuff. It's like Protestantism is quite a bit less rigid, I suppose, but there's still this formula to here, and if you just think about it at its core level, here are the 10 things that it means to be good in the eyes of God, right? And maybe think about here is 10 things that means or that make somebody good in the eyes of their fellow man, right? Like honor and courage and shit like that. It's like we instinctively think this way, otherwise our historical writings wouldn't reflect that. So what the fuck are we doing now?
Yes.
It's just like we're blindfolded throwing darts at a dartboard now. Why? I don't understand it.
Yeah, well, it's funny to think about it from the context of from religion, because when you look at, you know, like the Orthodox Church, it's like very rooted in disciplining the flesh, adherence to the Ten Commandments, and you realize that discipline is actually an incredibly godly thing that's been given to us through the scriptures. But the U.S. church, Western Church, is very bastardized, and we look at everything as a scientific proof. And then even a lot of these non-denominational churches, huge worship bands, and it's purely focused on the fact that God forgives you of your sin, and that's why Jesus died. So we almost use it as an excuse to be an undisciplined piece of shit, which is not the answer either. So I think that might even be the answer to your question as well. But I would say for me too, man, even just turning 30 in June, and I got engaged a few weeks ago, even just the changes of like thinking about the next step of being a husband and a father, being realistic with myself of like, dude, where are you falling short? What are these habits that you've been doing that you shouldn't be doing? Now you're going to be taking care of a wife and children because you want to have kids. It's super humbling, and I think that you don't need to get married to have those reflections, but it's like just having that brutal honesty with yourself and just continuing to chip at your own marble too.
Yeah,
I feel like you've done a really good job of that, just continuing to just pick away at that.
Well, what you're describing is, and I talk to my friends in the national security apparatus about this a lot. It's consequences, right? That's the guardrail thing I was talking about before. If you don't set rules and create boundaries for yourself, you will fail. It's that simple. It's like, think of it, I mean, this is reductive as fuck, but think of it in this terms. You're playing football and you keep throwing passes to guys that are out of bounds. You failed because you didn't respect the fucking rules of the game.
Yeah.
There are rules to this game, my friend. You've got a brief amount of time on this earth. You've got a lot of work to do, right, to make yourself functional.
Yeah.
To the people around you, which is what's really important, not for yourself. And now, you know, I feel like previous generations, like the World War II generation and before, they had to learn these lessons very young because life was more difficult. And now we're learning these lessons in our late 20s, early 30s. We've retarded our lives to some degree, right? We don't function as well as young because we don't learn that specific lesson that there's fucking rules, you know? And I'm not talking about the law or like Wall Street and their bullshit or anything like that. I'm talking about being a good man, right? There are rules to this. Like, you are responsible for the people around you. I don't like this I'm not my brother's keeper bullshit. The hell you aren't. That's the whole fucking reason you're on this planet, motherfucker. Yeah. It's like, and the quicker you realize that, the quicker you can realize that eating well and exercising and training, you know, fighting or guns or whatever it is, it's not about you looking cool or looking fit or being attractive. It's about being a functional defender of the things that matter, right? Like, you are the deadbolt on the door. You better goddamn do your job. And it's like, you know, it seems like it takes longer and longer for people to realize that. You know, it's the ego these days is out of control.
Yeah.
Like, we think that life is all about us, and when has it ever been? You know, it just drives me crazy.
So you're talking about, you know, nutrition, proclivity towards violence. It's almost, as I'm hearing you speak, you're like, that's just a conduit to you to build a great body of work just to be able to serve the people around you. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah. Let's see. Where is it? Fight Club became the reason to cut your hair short and trim your fingernails. Right? Remember that phrase from Fight Club? Mm-hmm. It's like, the reason that we do these things isn't for aesthetics or presentation. It's to be fucking capable. Yeah. That's it. It's to be as capable as you possibly can, because people are counting on you to be that. You know what I mean? That's your purpose in life. I'm not saying not everybody's going to have a proclivity towards violence. Not everybody's going to be good at it. Most people, the vast majority of people, will never face it in their lives, right? But there's a level of herd immunity when it comes to goodness and strong men, right? Like when enough of the men in a culture are predatory, you get what's happening in Syria right now, or in Iraq, or any of these other fucking shithole places. When enough good men when enough strong men are good men, and it doesn't always have to be a vast majority. Sometimes it's just a simple majority. Sometimes it's even a plurality. Then the cost of being a bad man is too high, and people will fucking do what they're supposed to do, right? So it isn't just about, like, you don't have to go be a soldier or a cop or any of that stuff. Not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody should do that. But being a strong man that doesn't tolerate bullshit, right, and that projects strength and power to other people, that is a part of this functional mechanism that keeps our society safe. Whether you're wearing a badge and a gun or not, right? Just like what happened in New York on the subway, right, with Daniel Penny. Now, he happened to be a Marine before, but if he hadn't been, if he was just some random dickhead doing what he did on that train and protecting people, that is the type of output we need from men. Otherwise, society fails.
Yes.
Right? It's like, so that's why you do the thing. That's why you push yourself farther than you think you can sometimes. That's why you eschew the vice or whatever, or the temptation, and be disciplined. It's for that. And to be honest, I mean, I do this all the time. This is kind of fucked up, but when I'm working out, very frequently I just put on like combat footage, and it gets me fucking pumped up. You know what I mean? Because in my head, I imagine, well, if I stop now, if I don't give this my 100% right now, then my buddies are going to die. That's how it works in my brain, right? So if you find what motivates you, maybe it's your fucking wife, kids, parents, maybe it's your fucking puppy. I don't care. Maybe it's something more ephemeral like the country or whatever, right? But find that thing. And this is what separates good from great, by the way. People like Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan were able to find and weaponize their purpose like other people couldn't do it, right? And it's because they understood it for some reason. I don't know why, but you can get there. Like, you can find that when you're feeling shitty and don't want to do the thing you know you're supposed to do, find a reason to do it, right? Because you'll let yourself down, but you'll never let that reason down. That's how people work.
So you're saying the end goal is to be of use to society, and so that's what we're trying to get to. And the motivational anchor is your motivational anchor is, you know, these war videos or these YouTube videos. Sometimes it's me throwing on maybe it's a David Goggins podcast. What's more effective now is thinking about my future family that doesn't exist. And it's like, are you going to be the dad that actually wakes up at 4:30, and what is this going to compound to over the next 5 to 10 years? Or are you going to be the piece of shit that just sleeps in and then slacks off on their business? It doesn't matter what that motivational anchor is, but you have to do the deep work to figure out what is yours and then tap into it so you can actually be of use. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think it's motivating to think about too. Like, dude, the amount of potential that we have is insane. If that doesn't motivate you, man, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to get into specifics, you know, and that's why leadership matters too. Because again, back to this individuality thing, we have this sense that there is a large portion of us who climb the ladder, get to the top, and then pull the ladder up with us. But there's this old saying, I can't remember exactly who said it, but it goes something like, you've got two hands for a reason, one to pull yourself up and one to pull the next guy up, right? Like, all this stuff that we don't have 4 walls and a roof to protect ourselves, right? There were 3 little pigs, not 1.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we did all this to protect society because society is important, and that's the thing that we want to live in. So it's like, you know, what are you doing? What are you doing? And discovery of that is a big thing. So every time you achieve something, every time you hit some successful marker, this is a challenge for you, and I think it'll make you a better person as well. And it's definitely going to make the community around you better. Every time you have a successful moment, definitely celebrate it, right? You deserve to celebrate it. But pay attention, like, to how you got there, the good parts, the mistakes, and go tell somebody, right? You don't have to fucking write a book or whatever. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, but you don't have to write a book. But definitely find some people who are on the same wavelength as you, that are having the same struggles, and be like, hey, you know what worked for me is this, right? It's like, this is the way every expert has an apprentice throughout all of human history. And we just don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I see it over and over again. Who's out there? We complain about the state of young men in this country a lot, and I don't see anybody even trying to mentor them.
No.
Unless they're trying to, like, make money off of it, frankly.
That's well said. Yeah, it's and the weird thing too, right, is it's almost you need to find young people that truly have that apprentice mentality. You see that a lot in corporate America, of this younger generation just trying to jump every 6 months to a year to 2 years to get that increase in salary, versus settling in that role where they can really learn and accelerate that learning curve. But then also you need to be someone that's willing to mentor, just to help this younger generation. And also from a selfish perspective, it feels great to add value to someone's life. Like, normally when I feel like shit, I'm like, all right, what is there something nice that I can just go do for someone else, almost as like a cheat code to get myself out of that funk. And I don't know if it's a tendency with type A driven males. I feel like my highs can be really high and my lows can be really low. So now I'm just like, how do I just combat those lows and just get back to neutral or back to that high?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's just a particular type. I think it's true for everybody. Gandhi said 80 years ago that if you want to truly find yourself, lose yourself in the service of others, right? And it's a recognition that we were designed to be communal animals, right? The reward structure in your body chemistry is designed to reward you when you do the right thing for the most amount of people.
Yeah.
Right? It works. It definitely works. And the problem now is that it's become bastardized to a large degree because, excuse me, we're in the thoughts and prayers generation now, where you can fire and forget some platitude into the ethos or ether, and you get the same dopamine hit without having actually done anything for anybody. You know what I mean? That is the social version of eating ultra processed foods.
Yeah.
And it corrupts your soul because you never actually do the thing, and somewhere deep down you know that you didn't do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's the people that you basically you siphoned off joy from their misery, and you didn't do a goddamn thing to help them. That's how you should think of that. And that's evil to do that. Like, how dare you even think that that's okay to do that?
Well said.
Drives me crazy. Anyways, we got to get out of here, but tell everybody about Meat Mafia and tell them about your protein nibble.
Yeah, so Meat Mafia is the podcast that my co-host Terry and I have been doing for about 2 years. We're about 400 episodes in, and we're just exploring a lot of the topics that we talked about at length, just really exploring, how do we get so fat and sick as a population, and what are some simple things that everyone can do about it. So it's just the Meat Mafia podcast on every major podcasting platform. And then we also have our nose to tail protein powder company, Noble Origins, which is beef protein, organs, collagen, colostrum, kind of all in one scoop. So almost going the opposite direction of Athletic Greens, just giving you all those good animal-based nutrients. And it's just nobleorigins.com. But I appreciate you, brother. It's always great to see you, and I always feel like these conversations are like a lightning bolt of inspiration. So
good,
appreciate you, brother.
Yeah. And I the protein's good. There's not to my knowledge, I don't personally know of any other protein powder that is organ meat.
There's barely any out there that exist.
There's one other one that I tried and it was really bad. But I don't even remember what the fuck it was. I think it was in a bar too. I don't even think it was. But you guys make bars, don't you? Like a pemmican bar or something, or you did for a while?
You might be thinking of the Carnivore Bar potentially. They're good friends of Phillips, a vet too, really good dude. But the problem with a lot of the companies with organs is that they'll almost overdo the stevia, or they use a shitty quality stevia that tastes way too metallic.
Was nobody using monk fruit on that? I think monk fruit is a pretty common sweetener now.
Monk fruit's a good one too. Yeah.
Stevia is a plant. What's wrong with stevia? I don't know anything about it. I don't have a sweet tooth really. If I do, I eat grapes, to be honest.
Yeah.
So I'm not really into sugary stuff, but stevia is a plant extract, right?
It's a plant extract. It doesn't spike your blood sugar. That's specifically why we chose it. It's similar to what we were talking about with receipts, where there were a few headlines that went viral on social media about stevia being linked to infertility. But the amount of stevia that you have to consume to get to that point is like a preposterous amount of stevia. Yeah. So that's what we've used. We've thought about switching to monk fruit, but you just you constantly iterate. The flavors are great. It's just chocolate and vanilla, and it's simple. Yeah. If you're drinking a cookies and cream or Nutter Butter protein powder, it's probably not good for you.
So. Yeah. The more complex the flavor is, the less likely it's good for you.
100%.
That's usually true in non-real things. Good, like just regular food tastes pretty good. You know what I mean?
Yes. Once you unfuck your taste buds, it tastes amazing.
Yeah. I mean, so Joel, one of our editors here, he's the camera guy for Street Gonzo. He lived with me last summer for about 6 months, and he grew up eating bullshit, and as an adult ate mostly bullshit, and he lived with me for 6 months and ate meat every day. And now he's like got a subscription to Factor. He doesn't eat fast food at all anymore. I'm like, you're welcome. That last 5 years of your life that you're going to get now, you owe that to me. So I might make him a slave. I haven't decided yet. I'm not sure what use he's going to be at that age, but whatever it is, it belongs to me.
Meat slave.
But yeah, you can't. I don't think you can go back after that. You can't go back to that weird metallic taste or the tangy feeling on your tongue when you eat fake food after you eat real food long enough, which, by the way, is a good reason to not ever let your kids eat that bullshit.
100%.
So they never develop a taste for it to begin with.
Yeah. Have you heard of the book called The Dorito Effect? It's all about how big food companies have these flavor houses that manipulate your taste buds through artificial and natural flavoring. It's fascinating what they do. And then once you read that and you arm yourself with the right information and start eating these single ingredient real foods and develop adult taste buds, what we're actually designed to have, there really is no going back.
I'm going to check this book out. Mark Schatzker.
Schatzker. We've had him on the podcast. He's a good dude.
Where is he around here somewhere?
Canadian. We just did a version. I know.
Dude. Well, now I'm going to delete it.
I tried.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Thanks for coming today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, good seeing you, brother.
Yeah.
Thanks,
we'll see you soon. And thank you all for listening. It's been Citizen.